that we discuss on ethics, CSR, sustainability, and strategy. How do we fit these things together? And if we have to do it, how can we make it really work for us as a company? So let's go ahead and the learning objectives. We want to understand ethical behavior in business and what do ethical standards mean and norms mean for the larger society and for companies in specific. Recognize conditions that can give rise to unethical business strategies and behavior. I'm sure all of you figured out that a lot of businesses deal in unethical practices. You might share those ideas and examples today. I don't have an inventory of all the companies that do weird stuff, which disadvantage customers, which hurt the planet, which are irresponsible towards the environment itself. So if you know some examples that come to your mind, please feel free to discuss them. Uh, Another learning objective is gain an understanding of the costs of business ethics and the failures, and gain an understanding of concepts of CSR, sustainability in terms of the environment, not just business sustainability, environmental sustainability. And how do we balance all of these in ways that we don't put shareholders at a disadvantage? So what do we mean by business ethics? It's if you apply those ethical principles to everything that you do or everything that you decide to do, it could be decisions or actions. Those are the two things that we actually indulge in, whether it's in personal life or whether we are at the workplace. Are we driven by certain ethical principles and the way we carry ourselves at work or in our day-to-day life? And these are that's what we call as ethics. And of course, in a business context, it's called as business ethics. And they're not very different from what we have as ethics in our day-to-day practice or in our day-to-day life. So can we possibly think of some ethical principles that we think are applicable not just in business but in our day-to-day life?
Bonnie, you're unmuted.
Can we think of some examples of ethical principles that are applicable every day in everybody's life, not just at the workplace?
Treat everyone like the way you want to be treated.
Wow. Okay. She went straight to the Kantian ethics, right? Yeah. So you're actually speaking to the categorical imperative. Immanuel Kant, his philosophy of Kantian ethics, he said, do exactly act in ways that you think can become a universal law. If I'm doing something, I'll not mind even if you make that as a universal law. That means everybody else can do the same thing to me. The same thing that I'm willing to do to you, I'm okay if everyone did the same thing to me because it's universally accepted. So Samantha, you just actually spoke to, there's no reference to Immanuel Kant here in this chapter, but I don't know if you said it deliberately, but that's what we call as Kantian ethics. I'm not going to go into the philosophies and the whole theories that are involved in ethics, but it's a very good theory that you might want to read sometime later. It's called Kantian Ethics by Immanuel Kant. And he spoke about the categorical imperative. Actions that you don't mind others doing the same thing to you, decisions or rules that you're creating, you don't mind following the same rules or decisions. As long as they are the same, you're ethical. Anybody else can come up with ideas of what general ethical principles are applicable in our day-to-day life? Now, sources of ethics. I mean, this chapter is a simple introduction to ethics. It doesn't go very deep into ethics or the theories of ethics, but we can always refer to some of the stuff that we already have heard and known from before. So one of the school of thought is the school of ethical universalism, that ethics are universal, principles that have to be followed, which are good and for the betterment of everyone, are pretty much universal. How many of you think that ethics are universal across regions, across countries, across every walk of life? Would you agree ethics are universal?
I would think so.
And Some examples of those ethical principles that are pretty much universal.
Um, mm, like I think like the whole treat everyone like the way you want to be treated is pretty universal.
Correct.
Like I guess if you treat everyone with respect, then you'll get respect in return as well.
Absolutely. And something else? Anyone else? It doesn't have to be Samantha. So, do you think any other ethical principle should be universally accepted? There's no way that you think, no, in certain regions or countries or certain contexts, they can be changed. No, these are universal. Do you find some other principles like that? Honesty. Would you think that's universal?
Yeah.
Yeah, across all cultures, in every walk of life. I think, these are safe bets to say these are examples of universal ethical principles. So there is this school of ethical universalism which says some of those ethical principles are applicable anywhere, whether in the business context or whether in one country or another country. It doesn't really matter. These are stuff that everybody values and considers being good for everyone. Then there is the school of ethical relativism, because you have so many cultures, and in certain cultures, certain things are okay. And in certain cultures, certain things are not okay. Can you think of some examples like that? Where ethics can be relative to the culture, to the practices, and to the kind of history that they have in a particular country.
I mean, I would say if you think of something like respect, like it's like I feel like that's something that's ethical, but depending on the country, respect might be in different forms.
Okay, yeah, I get what you're trying to say. There are elements of, say, respect, which are universal, and certain elements of respect which could be very culturally specific. And supporting your example, I would think, like, say, for example, in Japan, you just can't, move anything with your foot. So respect is not only towards people, respect is also towards furniture, towards objects. You need to use your hands to move stuff around. If you're just going to move a table or a chair or anything with your foot, it's actually considered disrespectful. So when you say respect, yeah, there are elements of respect which are universal, certain elements of respect or reverence. I would love to use the word reverence, the kind of deep rooted sense of gratitude along with respect. You call it reverence, that sense of gratefulness. So I think Japanese culture takes respect to another level, because you can easily replace the word respect with reverence. So yeah, there is relativism because of cultural factors and the history of the place and the kind of lifestyles that people have lived in that country or region. And there's this last one, which we call as integrated social contracts theory, which is like a combination of the first two schools, that universal ethical principles guide all your actions. And there is a subset where you're also, sensitive to cultural issues and relative ethical principles that should be also given respect to. Like, for example, if you go to the Middle East, everything that you manufacture in terms of food, you got to have a process that you're following so that you can name that particular food and label it as halal. So I think that's only halal is considered ethical. If it's non-halal product, it's unethical for them. It's just not acceptable, because that's a cultural thing, and they don't want to be selling, manufacturing, or producing or stocking up non halal products. So for them, non halal is not ethical. It's against every possible ethical principles that they can espouse. So obviously, that's what we call. So you have certain principles which are universal. You need to have a code of ethics that passes that test of universalism. And there is again the second element, which is relativism. So if you bring it together, I think you create societies that are harmonious. We're not trying to do outsmart one another. We're not just fighting for our own selfish needs. and we are, concerned about everything. It's profits, people, and the planet. The triple bottom line is taken care of because we have an integrated social contracts theory, which is taking care of the universal principles, but also considering the relativism part of ethical principles. So that's actually there in the next slide, I believe. Yeah. So universalism holds that common understanding across multiple cultures and countries of what actually is right and wrong. And to say honesty is the right thing to do. Being honest is the right thing to do. I think that's a universal ethical standards, like the way Samantha was talking about treating others with dignity, respect, and giving them the kind of recognition that they deserve is considered, I believe, ethical as a universal ethical standard across countries, across cultures, across societies, and of course in businesses as well. What's the effect of such a theory or school of thought on business? That means you actually are going to have in your code of ethics for your company those principles enshrined. And it's the duty of the top management and you as a manager that you understand your company's code of ethics, you communicate it, and make sure you train people on ethical practices and what are not acceptable practices, and make sure you actually stick to those ethical norms because you don't want to hurt your company's long-term standing. You want goodwill for your organization. You want your customers to feel proud of you. You want to retain them. You want to create positive impact on your supply chain, on your customers, on governments. You don't have issues with compliance. You're not paying penalties and fines that governments can lay on you, and you don't want to lose that kind of brand image and reputation that you've built for so long. So effect on business ethics is huge, whether it's universal principles or relative principles that you think are specific to a country. You need to follow them just to make sure that your business actually has a long-term standing. Relativism, I was telling you that beliefs, customs, and norms across countries are different. And I was giving you the example of Middle East, where halal products. You actually board an Emirates flight, even from New York. You will actually, as soon as they start serving you food, if you just pick up any packaged food that has been served to you, you will see halal product because they want to make sure that they are sensitive to local customs, the Middle East beliefs and customs and norms. So if you're actually creating products which are halal products, see, it could be an American brand, but halal now. You literally have the entire Middle East as a possible destination for you to export and sell. I think that's what every American brand does already. So it's not a bad thing if some of those brands are not doing it. And if you get into those companies and you discover, hey man, you're not actually labeling it as halal product. So if there is a little process change, use it, make sure it's really halal. You label it. That means you have a huge audience in the Middle East, possible target market, and including Indonesia, not just the Middle East, including India. India has got about, I think, if I'm right, about 18% of its population is Muslim population. And then you talk about Pakistan, Bangladesh, Indonesia, and the Middle East put together is huge. So all the Muslim population on these countries where a lot of Muslims live, they're all your target market audience. They're all your prospective customers. So it's a good thing. You can actually produce great quality products here. And when I say halal, they have to be food products, some packaged food products that you think are known everywhere, but you make sure it's halal. It's also from US. It's got its own uniqueness. Brand it, label it halal, and you have a market there. Effect on business ethics. It just goes to show that you respect the local standards, the local customs and beliefs. It just shows that your company is sensitive and you care. Now, examples of ethical relativism, the use of underage labor. I don't know how do I actually, I'm not going to be able to support any of these. So it's not my personal opinion. But then certain of these practices are okay in certain countries. Payment of bribes and kickbacks. I mean, that's an unethical practice, I'm sure, in the US, correct? You cannot bribe or take kickbacks, right? But in certain countries, if you do not, you know, gift somebody, they don't use the word bribes and stuff like that. They say you need to gift. It's just that you have to gift somebody in the government for your, clearances to happen, for permissions to be granted. And that's the, what would you do as a company? Would you actually go and say, let me lower my own ethical standards, let me accommodate these kind of practices in a country? Or would you say, let me stay away from this country because my universal ethical principles are getting violated here? What would you do?
I would avoid the country. But
Right.
I know, like, if you think of I know in another class I read a case study where Walmart bribed officials in, I think it was Mexico, in order to create a location because they knew that that like a lot of people would come to that location. Um, so, but then it was like top managers didn't know. So it's also a matter of like, it may not be the company itself lowering their standards, but certain individuals within the company kind of choose to go one way, but it reflects on the company as a whole.
Right, and it can hurt your prospects in that country and also have a ripple effect in your presence in other regions as well, right? It just lowers your reputational capital that you've taken pains to build. So obviously, all these are examples of that. And then relativism equates to multiple sets of standards. So you're not just sticking to one standard set of ethical principles, but you have multiple. The use of local morality to guide ethical behavior. I mean, that's kind of okay, but you need to have specific detail if you want to make a decision of whether your company wants to stick with that relative ethical principle, whether it fits into your universal ethical code or not. Again, here is we've spoken several times. They're saying Apple gives their code of conduct, and they're Apple certified suppliers because they want to make sure that the workers working in their Chinese facilities, whether it's Foxconn or other suppliers that Apple depends on, that they're actually not abusing workers, that the workers get great working conditions, and also they get equitable wages. That's what Apple does. So how effective has Apple's supplier code of conduct been in reducing abuses? They have been pretty effective because they enforce. If you want to continue to be an Apple supplier like Foxconn is, you got to make sure that the working conditions are great and then the wages are equitable and that workers are not being exploited. See, a lot of textiles, apparel gets manufactured in Bangladesh. And if you actually visit these manufacturing facilities, these textile industries in Bangladesh, their working conditions are terrible. They're in crowded places, buildings that are in bad shape, there are no safety norms, evacuation procedures are not in place, exits are not proper, and there are hundreds and thousands of people working in cramped spaces, lack of lighting, lack of clean air and stuff like that. It's sad, and because all these examples come to in the forefront, and because news actually brings it together, and there are plenty of examples which then go back to saying companies have to be stronger and stringent when they enforce these code of ethics, and companies have gotten better after that. Is it fair for Apple to prescribe that its suppliers comply with those universal standards? I would think yes. Otherwise, exploitation will continue by local companies. So Apple is enforcing it, and who stands to benefit? I'm sure the local company that works with Apple is also benefiting because they build on their own brand image and reputation for having worked with Apple. They're also building on their own image because they're treating their employees and with fair practices. So the answer to the second question is definitely yes, because employees are happy, workers are happy, the local company is doing better, and they continue to be Apple partners, which is good for them. And Apple definitely is setting the kind of standards. But there are instances and examples where Apple has used you know uh, material from Africa, mines from Africa to build their batteries. I think Apple is involved, Tesla is involved, other computer manufacturing industries are involved in mining lithium material chemical compound from Africa, and they've wiped out villages. So there is a lot of legal issues going on with these companies. So I'm not trying to say Apple sets standards everywhere, but maybe Apple was not as aware what was happening in Africa. But Google Maps pictures show villages getting wiped out from the surface of the African continent just because of illegal mining and the bad impacts of mining itself and the health issues that it has generated for workers who have been working there. Integrated social contracts theory, this is the middle ground. You're trying to put a balance between universalism, where ethical principles are universally accepted, and relativism, which is where you consider local customs, beliefs, and norms and the cultural aspects of it. So there is a first order level of ethical principles that you need to comply with. That's the first level. And then there is that subset, which we call the second order actions, which consider, say, for example, the halal products that I was mentioning for the Middle East and the Muslim population. That's extremely important. So effects of the social contracts, that means you have to stick with those universal ethical norms, and it takes a precedence over the local norms. But if a local custom is not ethical and if it violates universal ethical norms, then you don't want to be doing these things, because universal ethical norms, they take a precedence over the local ones. And you apply these code of ethics, and while you applying these code of ethics, the universal standards come first, with allowance for local ethical diversity and influence, as long as they don't violate the universal standards. So I think it's this middle ground, the social contracts theory, especially is very relevant to businesses that go to other countries. If you're just an American company operating in America, you're not going to have these problems. You can just have your own, universal ethical principles, or your own code of conduct, and you can simply have compliance, based on the regulatory framework, and you don't have to bother. But if you're going to other regions and countries, that's where the relativism element comes, and you need to have a fine balance. And that fine balance is possible if you use the social contracts theory. Again, you can go with, say, a lot of John Stuart Mill. He spoke about, ethics as whatever action you take, it should benefit the largest number of people. You should do the greatest good for the greatest number of people. So all your stakeholders, whoever is getting affected by actions or decisions, if you're doing the greatest good for the greatest number of your stakeholders, that stays ethical. It's just not possible to decide something that benefits every single individual. But if majority get the benefit of your action or rule or decision that you're taking, John Stuart Mill calls that as utilitarianism. He says this is ethical because it's contributing to the utility of the largest number of people on that particular society or country or region or business. So as long as it serves the greatest good for the greatest number of people, those actions or rules or decisions that you're taking are considered ethical. So you can look at ethics from different Rawls' justice. There's another way of looking at ethics. The Rawls justice theory is a great way, because he says equity, fairness, whatever you do, you treat people, Samantha was saying, treat people just the same. That is equity and fairness. Whatever procedures that you're using to evaluate people or distribute the benefits of collective action, the procedure that you're employing to determine who gets what, that also should be fair. That's what Rawls is talking about. Rawls justice. He speaks about fairness and equity. So there are many, many ways of looking at ethics, and these are guiding theories. You can read plenty. I can't speak about too much of theory in this class because we just focused on a couple of approaches, and some of them have been discussed here. The ethics code litmus test, whatever. If you have an ethics code at the workplace, School of Management has its own ethics code right now. So if you want to see, are we doing great in terms of ethics, put it across with the litmus test. Test it. Whatever we are trying to do in terms of decisions taken or rules created, are we compliant with our code of ethics? Or is there some ambiguity? So if you want to award a stipend to somebody, you want to give extra money to somebody, you want to, give a title to somebody, extra, whatever, anything to do with position, money, promotion, whatever you're doing, is it actually compliant with the code of ethics? If the answer is yes, I think it's passing that first test. Is this action in harmony with our core values? So we shouldn't be having this conflict of interest. So if I show some favoritism, and if I try to promote somebody undue with giving them undue advantage, so obviously it's not in harmony with our core values. You should come first, and the school should come first. Say all the stakeholders should come first. It's not about personal preferences. So obviously, core values means that the school first, stakeholders first, students first, and it's not about me and what I like or what I don't like. The third test: is there anything in the action that is ethically objectionable? Would you think that stakeholders, students, any one of us, these stakeholders might raise an objection to what we do? If you think it's the case, then you should not be doing it. In this case, they also mention SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission, and or the media. So if any of these, the watchdogs, the activists, government agencies, your stakeholders, suppliers, customers, if they find something objectionable, obviously you don't want to be doing that. So it could mean how you treat your workers. It could mean how you procure your raw material. What are the ingredients that go into manufacturing a particular product? You want to make sure that you're not doing something that's disadvantaging any of these constituents that are supporting your process of manufacturing or your finished products. So anything objectionable, no, don't do it. You're hurting, say, suppliers, or you're hurting farmers from you get the ingredients, or you're actually indirectly supporting somebody who is putting farmers at a disadvantageous position. Anything like that, if you observe, and if you think the media can see it, or if you think someone else can notice it and it doesn't look good, it doesn't look right, you shouldn't be doing it. So obviously you can pass your ethics code through this litmus test, and it should guide your actions and rules that you're creating. So what happens when you have ethically questionable strategies that are not based on sound ethical principles? It's easy. If you fail that litmus test, which we were discussing just now, you might actually attract sizable fines and a lot of lawsuits. Say what happened with ExxonMobil, what happened with other companies like Toyota when they were having a recall of Prius. You have so many cases where companies did something unethical or were slow to react to stuff that they should be admitting. Compromises on quality, compromises on safety. Any of these kind of actions, you will have fines, civil fines, and plenty of lawsuits that you're. I think ExxonMobil and companies like Enron is a classical example of a lot of fraud and stuff. Devastating image and public relation hits. It's no rocket science. Your reputation will go plummeting, and sharp stock price drops, and obviously you'll do bad in the stock markets itself because your investors are no longer happy. Criminal indictments and convictions. Individuals may be jailed. You would be into long drawn battles, legal battles. It'll continue to hurt you and haunt you as a company. So it's always fair that you want to stay ethical. Now, what are the drivers of unethical strategies and business behaviors? I want to ask you a question. What happened to Carlos Ghosn from Nissan? Any updates on Carlos Ghosn from Nissan, the ex-CEO? Does anybody have an update on what's happening with Nissan's ex-CEO? Okay, I'll take it as a no. So obviously faulty internal oversight, which allows self-dealing in the pursuit of personal gain wealth. Say Nissan's ex-CEO, Carlos Ghosn, for many years, actually, I've taken his example as being a great leader, not realizing what was going on. And he's amassed a lot of personal wealth, and it actually shows there's plenty of self-interest in what he did. So that's a driver of unethical business behavior. Once you're in a strong position, say you're the CEO, and you have access to taking tough decisions, you have access to resources, You're signing off on big deals, and you have the power to convince others who are working with you towards those decisions. And if they are for personal gain, definitely these are unethical. And that's one of the reasons why you find a lot of skeletons fall off the closets in terms of unethical behavior that people show. So, and short-termism, pressure to meet or beat short-term performance targets. If you want to achieve success short-term, if you're a company that's doing everything, you think means are not important and ends will justify the means always, you might get into unethical behavior, business behavior. You will put strategies in place that do not, have compliance, that do not consider what kind of effects that you have on customers, and because you're focused on short term, you just want to succeed and you want to have it achieved at any cost. But doing it the right way is very important. So short termism can put pressure, and you can get into unethical business behavior. The last one, a culture that puts profitability and business performance ahead of ethical behavior. See, the thing is, how do you keep purpose and profits together? It's important that we get profits. Nobody is trying to discount the importance of profits, but purpose is also important. If you lose focus on purpose and you just focused on profits, you might end up creating a culture that supports unethical behavior. But if you're not losing sight of, say, purpose, and if you're focused as much on purpose as you're focused on profits, because purpose actually tells you the mission, the vision, and the values. So, as much as you're focused on trying to get profits through your business model, but you do not forget why you're here. What's the purpose that you're here at the first place? What defines you as a company? And what is that you want to see yourself achieving as a company? Where do you want to see the company in the next 5, 10 years? And what are the three, four, five, six core values that you want everybody to remember the company for? If you don't forget that purpose and you make a fine balance between purpose and profits, I think perhaps you will stay ethical in terms of strategies or actions that your company takes. Otherwise, you can end up building a culture that's short sighted, that's focused too much on profits, and you forget your own purpose and values. You're faltering after a while, you end up in murky waters. I think I can actually, at this point of time, I can actually show you some of the examples that I found. Do you remember anything that actually inspired you from Patagonia? They know they're big time on sustainability, recycling, and they want to make sure that they really take care of the environment. They do all of
Yeah.
that. Yeah. What else?
They even so they have a few different there's they like I guess you could say they like recycle clothes. So if you have something and it doesn't fit you anymore, they will buy it back from you so you can spend money towards something else and then they'll recycle it. A big thing too is like their marketing, like they're very big on like they will support like even like politically, like they'll support a candidate and they have no problem saying who they support. And if you
Mhm.
don't like that they support that candidate, they pretty much tell you that they don't care.
Right.
Um, but they also go to the point of like they made a whole entire advertisement saying don't buy this jacket, specifically telling customers to not buy the new jacket that they just came out with if customers already bought a jacket from them like last season that's still in good condition, because they're trying to avoid like fast fashion and like consumerism and putting waste into the country.
Okay. So I'm happy that you still recall from your favorite company. So and there are plenty of examples. Dr. Bronner's is one. By the way, there's an interesting concept. I don't know how many of you are very familiar with certified B Corporation. And that's because we are talking of, say, companies that they produce soaps, balms, lotions, and cleaners. Again, in this case, they do not use any synthetics or additives. They're using the purest of ingredients, meaning that they're all natural products. And obviously they're concerned with what kind of impact they have on people, on the environment itself. And there are plenty of this comes second on the list of socially responsible companies. Maybe this list is different. You might find other lists which have a different set of companies. Their ranking could be different. Clean Canteen, they want to reduce the use of plastic, and they want to manufacture bottles and food canisters, which are favorite conference takeaway gifts, but which are environment friendly, reusable again. And so again, they're very conscious about the environment itself. All good products. I think this is a very interesting company. They're reef friendly sunscreen, because every time people go on vacation, they're visiting, say, the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, or the lakes and then the beaches. Everybody's on sunscreen, and heavy loads of sunscreen every time that you visit, these waterfronts. So they're creating products, skincare products, especially the sunscreen itself, which is reef friendly, meaning that you're not polluting these lakes and oceans and water bodies with toxic chemicals, because there is marine life there, and you want to make sure that the water bodies are clean, and not they don't become toxic. So you have plenty of examples. Warby Parker, they found out that like 15% of the world's population that require glasses do not have access to the glasses. And for every glass that you purchase from this company, they're not very expensive. Every time you go up and buy one pair of glasses from this company, one pair gets donated, which makes a lot of sense, because all the hundreds and thousands of people, poor people who cannot even afford a pair of glasses, which they should be having, they get one pair of glasses for free. And these are not expensive again. And Ben and Jerry's is another, they call themselves as guilt-free ice cream. We should promote this brand to Dean Jess, right, Melanie? So
Yeah.
I'm sure he stopped eating too much of ice cream these days, so we can tell him, see, you don't have to feel guilty. Go ahead and have Ben and Jerry's. Again, it's again speaking to the kind of ingredients that go in there, and what kind of, yeah, GMO labeling, fair trade, climate action. They are including, they actually speak to a lot of things like racial justice, democracy, refugees, and gender equality, and all that kind of stuff. So there are plenty of examples. And because I spoke about B Corp, this is the site that you go about B Corps, and because I was telling you, it's like it's all about balancing profits and purpose, making sure environmental performance is as important as financial performance, and public transparency is important, legal accountability is important. And there are plenty of companies which are certified B corporations, and some of the examples are there. So, and again, Patagonia comes in here. So hopefully one day, Melanie, you will work with them in some capacity. You could be a consultant to them, hopefully. Okay. So there are a lot of good companies here, which are yeah. By the way, this is what actually interested me. New Belgium Brewing Company, and they've grown to be the third largest craft brewery in the U.S. Just figure out what kind of brewery are they? Are they into what kind of brewing company is this? Maybe it'll help you come up with something creative for Nicholson Ranch. I just didn't go there. You can view an impact B impact report, because these are companies which are balancing both profits and purpose. So there are a lot of clients. I mean, this is just a representative sample of companies. So all the good companies that I was speaking about as socially responsible companies are B Corporation members. So they're certified. So that means they have an audit, and then they have this certification, which speaks to the three bottom lines that we have: profits, planet, and people. So I can stop share. I'll go back to my slides so we can finish off our chapter. So drivers, yeah, I think we spoke about drivers of unethical business behavior. We're done with that. So let's move on. Yeah, this is an example that they speak about General Electric having a very strong code of ethics. Or it says, they rely on financial performance, and they have stuff like one strike and you're out. Is that ethically too harsh? And they have global ethical standards, and are they practical over the long term? Are they relevant in every country they operate? These are some questions you might want to think of. Just you can visit their website, look at their code of ethics, and ask yourself these questions: are they too harsh? Are they practical? And if they are they applicable in other countries as well? So that's one just moral case and business case. Why should a firm's strategies be ethical? I think it's no brainer. You have the moral case where if you do something wrong, it just affects the company's personality. The firm's personnel and the people who work with the company, they get affected. You don't feel good working for a company that's not ethical. And there is a business case because you're affecting, let's say, customers, you're affecting revenue flows, you're adversely impacting the interest of shareholders. So morally, employees are going to feel down and out. Business wise, shareholders are going to hurt. So these are visible costs, internal administrative costs, and intangible or less visible costs, but which have as much of an impact as much as the cost elements. If you're not an ethical company, if you're indulging in unethical practices and strategies, government fines and penalties, civil penalties, a lot of things can happen. The cost to shareholders in the form of lower stock price, we just discussed that. Internal administrative costs, legal and investigative costs incurred by the company, the cost of providing remedial education and ethics training to your own employees, costs of taking corrective action. You might have to redesign, revisit your processes, quality standards, compliance issues, maybe design elements. It's expensive. So you don't want to indulge in. Do you remember, recall one of the companies that was actually manipulating emission standards from their cars?
Wait, what?
VW, right, Sam?
Yeah.
Any more detail, Samuel, that you might want to discuss on that instance?
I didn't look too far into it because I wanted them to provide more information on like how they wanted to resolve it. So I didn't want to pronounce any like false accusations until they're good with it.
No, Volkswagen is already paying like tons of money in terms of damages and the legal lawsuits that they're fighting against. They have lost tons of money.
Yeah, it was like a $4.3 billion settlement.
Right, it's huge, and then it just keeps adding. It's just not going to leave them anytime soon. They have cases that they're fighting against in the European Union, in the US, global markets, everywhere they have taken a beating. So there are plenty of other examples, but I recall some easily, and you can keep adding to those examples where if you're not ethical and if you're not following, okay, there's somebody who shared an
Yeah,
entire file.
it's a
That's
case
you.
study. It's from my management textbook.
Okay, that's cool. So, and they have huge losses that they have incurred. So these costs of revisiting your standards, revisiting designs and your software and all kinds of costs are involved. And then of course, customer defections, loss of reputation, brand name, your own employees, they're no longer motivated, and employee turnover, they would want to go away to another company, which is viewed positively by everyone in the society. Higher recruiting costs because you're not going to find the best talent, adverse effects on employee productivity, and the cost of complying with the often harsher government regulations. Yeah, VW is under the scanner and they will continue to be under the scanner for quite some time. So these are huge prices that you have to pay if you decide to be unethical. So it's always nice and safe that you want to choose to stay as ethical as you can be. CSR, this is an interesting thing. I've seen a lot of CSR activities across several organizations. You can share your experiences rather than me telling examples for each. But it's the firm's duty to operate in an honorable manner. Working conditions, we spoke about Apple's case where they're ensuring that Foxconn and other suppliers of Apple in China provide good working conditions and equitable pay. They encourage workforce diversity, to be good steward of the environment and actively work for better quality of life in the local communities. I recall from my previous classes that we spoke extensively about Hyundai, the Korean automobile manufacturer in operating in India, which do a lot of things like setting up schools, primary healthcare centers, laying roads, providing street lighting, and providing emergency services in terms of accidents, going to these engineering colleges, doing recruitment, providing employment opportunities, or running a full-fledged bus service where they pick employees and drop them at their doorstep. There's plenty. I mean, they give them opportunities to go to Korea and to be trained in specific skills. So apart from professional development and ability to work and perform better, getting best of the industry standards in terms of pay and compensation. Apart from that, they do plenty of community services. They've adopted like a 40-kilometer radius range around their plant location. They've just said every village that comes here, we make sure that you get potable, clean drinking water. Your streets are lit up, and then the roads are laid. And if there is an emergency service, we are ready to pick you up using our own infrastructure and vehicles. So they do plenty of CSR activities. I'm just talking of one example where working conditions are better for employees, the workforce diversity is great, and they contribute to the environment that they're working with. They help the local communities, and of course, society at large. Can you think of other examples like the one which I just described? Any example is okay. So if you're not going to, we'll move off to the next slide. Now, what are the components of CSR? I mean, you can break it down into more. It's not necessary you have to stick with only these. So workforce diversity, yeah, I mean, I've heard people tell me certain kind of organizations are more supportive of workforce diversity while others are not. So, and then you build your reputation, people will talk about it. So the more you promote workforce diversity, you have a positive image about your company, and everybody, the best talent wants to come and work with you. Actions to ensure company operates honorably and ethically, that's a very broad statement here. So everything that you might think, like what I just said about Hyundai as a car manufacturing company, I think that fits into this blue blob that's there. Actions to support philanthropy, participate in community service, and better quality of life worldwide. You have plenty of those examples where you're giving back, setting up schools, supporting continuing education, or supporting renewable energy projects implemented across the globe. You have plenty of philanthropy that good companies, socially responsible companies do. Actions to protect and sustain the environment. I've seen companies, percentage of profits or percentage of sales proceeds going into planting afforestation, planting trees and stuff like that. In India, we had a very interesting project going as Save India's Rivers. And this movement was great. I don't know, millions of trees have been planted across those river deltas. Because if India's rivers go dry, it's a country which supports 1.3 billion people. And imagine if all the rivers went dry. It's like our lifelines being cut off. So they are doing desperate measures to come up with a proper strategy and come up with a proper action plan in support of having as many trees planted. So you can still do your cultivation of commercial crops, but don't forget we need to have trees. Trees actually help in saving the topsoil, keep the fertility of the soil. Trees also help in grabbing water, rainwater, and also lets the rainwater seep in and improve the ground level water. And all these are important elements in saving the environment. So there's been a big movement in India. It happened for the last 2 years. I don't know how much of impact it'll create, but whatever I see across many cities, I've got very positive inputs. Millions of trees have been planted. So, you're not going to see the benefits of it immediately, but if you wait like 5 years, I think a lot of good will come out of it. And if you remember, we also were speaking about organic farming and stuff like that. And so there are many ways you can do it. So that's something that can work. And then also supporting girl child in India. There are plenty of activities that companies do to save the girl child and to give free education and nutritious food. Huge populations in India and Africa and other Asian countries suffer from malnutrition. Nutrition is a whole a big problem that's there. Imagine you don't get nutritious food from when you're a child. Your brain development gets stifled. Your physical development is not full. So you're definitely creating human beings who are not going to be as productive, who are not being going to be able to realize all their dreams. So the first and foremost thing is to address nutrition. So there are plenty of companies in India who actually contribute towards providing free food, nutritious food, good education, clean drinking water. Good things are happening. So do you have any examples that you can recall?
Uh, for which
CSR,
one?
for CSR, any of the CSR activities.
Oh, in Apple, they recently, the first release, the first launch. I know they did the third launch. The third launch was on Mac, but the first launch with the Apple Watch and stuff, they said that they were trying to go carbon free. I think so. I'm guessing they have been putting a lot of money, time, and investment into trying to make that at least happen. So they had to change, like, they probably have to change all their factories
Mhm.
slowly to gear towards that. So they're probably throwing lots of funds.
Right. And then the latest launch of Apple is like you don't have a charger because they're assuming that you already have an Apple device. They're
Mhm.
trying to cut down on again on e-waste
Yeah,
and reduce their carbon footprint, correct?
yeah. And I
Okay,
think,
so yeah,
mhm.
go ahead.
Oh yeah, and I was gonna say, like, Google, they do something with enhancing employee well-being,
Hmm.
because the way they've done like a tour of how like the place works, it feels like a second home to people who work there. It's like you don't feel like you're cramped up in a office, even though they do provide like an office space.
Hmm.
But if you want to feel like you want to be in a bed or in a couch, bean bags, they provide that. You
Yeah,
could
I know
just
that. Yeah,
sit wherever you want and
right.
do your work where you feel most comfortable, because they think
Hmm.
that's what drives creativity.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And when you say bean bags and Google's example, I'm strangely reminded of these kind of pods, sleeping pods that are available in Dubai International Airport. So Samuel, if you happen to go to Dubai, don't miss in the airports. You have what are called as sleeping pods. Now these are extremely advanced sleeping pods with touch screen, smart LED, computing devices, versus you can watch content and stream inside. It's a pod, so it's air
Oh,
conditioned, getting fresh air. You want to have a drink. It's all in your pod, and it's
oh, so
beautiful. So have a look at it.
wow, that's like a built-in like bed with an IMAX studio.
Yeah, and it's spacious and it's like really nice, and it looks very fancy as well from the top. Have a look when I'm sure if you Google search it, you will find, because I come from the experience of having worked in a country where they want the best. So, so they took Google's idea and made it the next level. May not be environment friendly, but it's luxury at the best. Okay. Yeah. So
They're
the triple
expensive.
bottom line, you see it?
Yeah, I looked at it. It's expensive. It's 12.25 an hour USD to rent. So that's like if you did 8 hours, that's over $100.
Yeah, so but I'm happy you saw that. So so these are things that, yeah, it's nice to discuss those, but I'm not sure if they're friendly and environment friendly, but that's what it is. Triple bottom line, I spoke about that. So all these companies, these examples of Google that you gave, Apple that we discussed, or Hyundai that we also discussed, these are all addressing all the three things, and they're making a fine balance between the three things: profit, people, and the planet itself. So it's great. You're just not focused on economic well-being, but you're also considering the social aspects, because companies work and operate in societies. And obviously we take resources from the planet, and resources are limited. So you want to be judicious the way you use it, and even including the waste disposal. Everything has to be responsible. Walmart, working as an example on reducing the carbon footprint, reducing the amount of packaging material that goes into their operations every day. And that's another great example where companies are becoming even more conscious of how they utilize resources. So these are examples, but this is like 2010. So Nokia still existed. So I don't want to go over that list. Some of them still there. good ones are there. So they can still be good examples, but yeah, maybe other examples are more relevant today. Sustainability. Now that's the key. Whatever you do, it's got to be sustainable. When you take resources and continue to use resources, you want to make sure that you want to replenish those resources. Because if you continue to use them, you'll go out of those resources. You'll fall short of them for sure. And with the increasing population that we have to support, we better find ways to be more sustainable. Again, say permaculture. I think I spoke about permaculture in one of my class. Did I? I'll just type it on the chat. Maybe your this is permaculture. Now, I still remember I shared a video across with some of the groups in this class of permaculture. To me, that's a classical example of sustainable agricultural practices. So let's see how much time. Okay, I'm right there. So permaculture is a classical example of maintaining the fertility of the soil, using mulching methods, doing water harvesting techniques, and making sure that the agricultural space that you're using is able to regenerate it for itself and is pretty much self-sustained. You don't have to use fertilizers. You don't have to use pesticides and toxic chemicals and pollute the earth. You just have to make it self-sustained. And because birds and insects and they help in transporting seeds and fertilization and that process is such a natural thing. So the produce that you're actually getting out of whatever your agriculture practice that you're having is pretty much organic. So you can make commercial profits from it because it's organic. You still have a market that prefer organic food and healthy food itself. And obviously that means profits are taken care of. You're responsible because you're making sure the practices are self-sustained. You're not hurting the soil itself, the environment itself. That's a great thing to do. So you can research a bit more of permaculture. It's very popular, even in the US, in Australia, in India. It's catching up. So we can finish quickly. So that's what we said, protect the environment. You want to have natural resources for as long as possible and maintain ecological support systems for future generations and guard against endangerment of the planet and then the other species, right? I've heard, say, for example, Sadhguru, an Indian mystic, he's a philanthropist as well. He's an entrepreneur. This person actually says, if human beings were wiped off from the surface of the earth, it's not going to make a big difference. But if all the insects and honeybees and all these disappear from the planet, we all will perish. Because these insects and honeybees and all these are really required for growth of plants and the ecosystems. They're extremely important. So if we do not respect that, and if we do not respect other creatures and nature itself, I think this planet will become like, say, inhospitable. It might become like Mars or other planets where it doesn't support life anymore. So we don't want that to happen. So again, moral case and business case, why we should have corporate social responsibility. And we can use all our value chain activities in ways that are more responsible. The raw material that's used, the manufacturing process, treatment of effluents and effluents that we are having, toxic substances which are coming out. Do we treat them properly before we release them in the air or in water? And we do not pollute the earth, and the packaging that we use, distribution networks that we use, recycling methods that we have. It's a circular economy. By the way, guys, it's not a bad thing to just go check out what I'm going to type in on the chat. This is a great topic that you want to, if you're part of a circular economy, that will be great. If you do something that actually speaks to a circular economy, you might get support funding from a lot of institutions. It could be venture capitalists, financial institutions, or other investors. Those can all invest in your ideas as long as you can prove that you're a part of a circular economy. You reuse, recycle, and refurbish as much as possible. You're creating a smaller carbon footprint. You're more responsible. So you can work on the entire value chain of how you can reduce the usage of resources, how you could be more responsible. So there is a moral case because stakeholders benefit. And there's a business case because you are a different company. You're a more responsible company. You're better than other companies. Again, you do not want to have this impression that you're compromising on quality. So do the right thing. That's the social contract that we have had. Operate ethically and legally, provide good working conditions for employees. We discussed that. Take care of the environment itself, display good corporate citizenship. You should be considered as a responsible company. So increased reputation, that's what we get. Reduced risk of reputation damaging incidents. We are not going to have to fight those lawsuits and pay those hefty fines and penalties. And lower turnover costs and enhanced employee recruiting. I mean, employees will want to stay with you because you're a responsible company and you will attract the best talent possible. Increased opportunities for revenue enhancement due to innovation that you're supporting, and support for the long-term interests of the shareholders. So I think CSR is not something that you think is optional. CSR is something that you want to actively pursue. That's the key. And you want to do everything that it takes, that you know that you're serving the two sides, the purpose side and the profit side. If you make that kind of balance, I'm sure people are taken care of. So that finishes off what we are supposed to be discussing in this chapter. So, and if you want to enforce that CSR is actually implemented, you create that kind of awareness of misdeeds of companies that have not done similar things. Legislation can force some part of CSR. I don't think it should be CSR being controlled by legal regulation alone. You do more than what's required by legislation. Refusal to do business with the responsible companies, that's another way of making sure CSR is part of our agenda for every company. Because if you're a CSR based company, you're strong on CSR activities, every other company wants to be associated with you and wants to do business. And if you have companies boycott those companies that are not responsible socially, that's a great way of actually enforcing that CSR is just not mandatory. It's just not optional, but becomes mandatory. So we're done with our chapter. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask me.